Hello everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here. Welcome to the Music Masterclass. And this is my weekly series I do on Thursdays where we look at some aspect of making music, talk about composition, theory, arranging, and all that kind of stuff here. And for the last several weeks, we've been looking mostly at scores from the Jazz Piano Holiday course that we've just wrapped up, and maybe we might have a little cleanup to do there. But now we can talk about some new projects and what else might be coming. So I actually I do want to talk about a couple of the last pieces that were submitted for the holiday course and just kind of play through them a little bit. Last week, we did the showcase and I got to play through everything that had been submitted so far, but there were a couple late submissions and I'll listen, we'll give a listen to those. And then I want to try to maybe draw some overall conclusions from the course and look at how it can apply to other contexts. So that's kind of my kind of goal here, and get people thinking about, well, what else can we do, and get some new music being written and submitted and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to the place where we've been submitting our pieces, and actually I don't have the chat up on here. I forgot to do that. So let me just get the chat up on this computer so I can easily paste links and things if I need to. But a couple of the last ones that were submitted was a new Silent Night. Actually, is this... so these are the latest submissions. Okay, good. So I think a couple of these we hadn't heard, starting here with... this piece here, Es wird so gleich dumper, and I'm pronouncing that as if it were German, even though some of those words don't make sense as German, so it's probably Dutch or something. Oh, Austrian. But language-wise, I guess that's German. Anyhow, let's check out this piece here, and I think in keeping with the In keeping with the theme that I had going last week, I'm not going to try to give a ton of here's what you could do differently type of feedback, because these are essentially finished arrangements. I want to talk about the things that are working well and just kind of celebrate all the good stuff that's happened. So this is a new carol to me. I didn't know this one. It's a traditional Austrian carol. So let's turn up the volume and hear this. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I love the piece, and someone had commented earlier on that it is reminiscent of "O Christmas Tree," and I think that I can agree with that. Christmas tree. So the beginning melody there. Right. It's kind of reminiscent of it. There's other aspects maybe also that kind of feel a little similar. Lots of melodies have things in common with other melodies, so nothing unusual about that. But, I just want to look at some of the individual sounds that are created here and point out how, just focusing on this measure right here, we have This is a B7 chord. The 9th is in the melody. You might need to refresh your browser because it seems like everyone else is hearing this, and I'm definitely seeing it live on my phone here. So maybe refresh your browser. Anyhow, so this sound here, the root and 7th here, the 9th there, that's one of these kind of jazzy sounds. It's a real simple thing. There's only 3 notes. And yeah, it's really it's a cool sound. And then we get to hear kind of the rest of the chord here. The 3rd of the chord and a 9th added along with another 7th. And, you know, those are the kinds of sounds that I want us to be focusing on because, yes, they are sounds that kind of come from jazz in a way, but not exclusively. You will see Debussy using sounds like that. I mean, these were sounds of the late 19th century Impressionist composers and sounds of the early 20th century composers as well. So they kind of came to jazz that way, as opposed to the other way around. Maybe George Gershwin was sort of a middle ground there, someone who actually did listen to jazz and was familiar with jazz musicians, brought that into his classical composition, and yet his classical composition was using those sounds already. So anyhow, yeah, those are... these are the kinds of sounds that I want us to be able to think of as, yes, this is the 21st century. We can use these sounds. So, great job there. All right, so the next piece that I would look at here, I'm going to actually skip your one here, Sora, and come back to it in a moment because we did listen to a version of it before, but you've updated it since. So last time we had a version of Silent Night, because 2 different people worked on that, and Peter just finished his. So let's hear Peter. Yeah, this is Peter Underwood's. Yeah, Peter. So let's hear Peter's version of Silent Night, which is in 4/4, as I think the other version that was submitted also was, if I'm remembering correctly. And let's just check this out. Yes, great job on this, Peter. So there's so much to love about what's going on here, and one of the things that I would point out is perhaps more than almost any other piece, there are things about this that I feel really need to be performed by a live musician to be most effective. By the way, if Joanne isn't hearing me talk, then what I say isn't going to help her. So maybe someone else could suggest that she try pressing the play button in the browser if merely refreshing the page isn't doing it. So it's already been suggested to refresh the page, but maybe pressing the play button will cause it to wake up or something. In any case, so yeah, the reason I say that about being played live is that there's certain things here that seem very expressive, and the way the rhythms are written is a way to so in other words, this like quarter note triplet figure here, like this feels very natural to me. And then if I can't quite read, here from the F flat to the E flat to the D to the D flat, that descending line is a really nice little line, and I feel like that line is what I would be bringing out in my playing, and it would probably not be exactly triplets or exactly dotted quarter. It would just be kind of a rubato-ish kind of. It'd be something like that, where my fingers are just sort of moving fluidly, which is, again, very, very Debussy-like. Well, you have to write a specific rhythm, but then when you go to play it, you play it a little more freely. So there's places like that where I feel like it's very expressive, and at some point to really work this up and get all the mileage out of it. So. But yeah, I think the way you've written the rhythms, Peter, is great for getting MuseScore to come at least close to the sort of things that a human musician might do. So yeah, this and he's using all the devices. So yeah, that flat 2, and then going to 1, the B major 7, going to B flat major 7. That's like, that is one of my my endings that I talked about there. So there's a lot of really nice things going on with the harmonies. I think he did a great job of finding interesting harmonic motions, a lot of using the specific idioms that I talked about, but also working in some of his own tonicizations and things. And these figures like this, this little drop 2 kind of voicing here. Just lovely. And yeah, these are drop 2 voicings, right? This is a diminished chord here, B diminished, with the A flat dropped down to the left hand, and then C minor 7 with the B flat dropped down. So, and that I just felt was like just a kind of perfect use of that technique. It came up during office hours. I think Dave was commenting that, well, gee, if you're going to use drop 2 voicings, or you probably, your left hand can't be doing as much because it's doing this thing, which is, yes, that is exactly true. When you're playing a drop 2 voicing, your left hand is busy playing part of the line, moving with the melody, moving with each voicing, so it can't be kind of doing its bass job. So you do this in situations where either there's a bass player present, or where you don't mind losing the bass for a second. And I just thought that was really effective. Let me just play that passage again. Now here is a place where he actually uses that drop 2 voicing, but doubles the left-hand note in octaves, which isn't like something I would normally think to do, because this is an A diminished chord with the G flat dropped down and placed here. This is B flat 6 with the 6th drop down. By the way, we don't write C diminished chord with the A drop down, but in all cases he's got it necessarily a harmonically significant note that we're playing in the left hand. It's just one random note from the middle of a voicing. But in this case, it works out really well, because it creates this stepwise bass line into the B flat. And so, getting inside Peter's head for a second, I have to imagine that maybe that's where he was coming from, is realizing that he was approaching the B flat in the bass anyhow, and that line was leading to the B flat, and why not let that B flat, because otherwise it would have been and then ended up here with the B flat up there. If you're long as you're going to land on that B flat chord, why not get it with the root in the bass, and then, oh, by the way, let it be that kind of drop 2. So yeah, I think that was a creative, perfectly appropriate thing to do, even if I've never like specifically seen like a textbook or anything lay it out that way. I think it makes sense. So yeah, I think that was I think that worked. By making it octaves, like I might have tried just doing this and let it be drop 2, but with a big hole in the middle. I don't know what I would have done, to be honest. But what you did worked, and so I'm not complaining. So anyhow, those were a couple of those pieces, and now I'm going to jump back to Sora's final piece and play through this. So we heard a interim version of it last week, and now we'll hear a more final version of it here. And yeah, same thing. I just want to really, talk about how just independent of specific whatever's going on, just the overall sounds are working really, really well. So let's just hear this piece now. Oh, before I play it, I should clarify for anyone who didn't see last week's or who hasn't seen Sora's piece before, this is an original Christmas song arranged as this. It was written specifically for the course. And so it's got all sorts of really interesting things going on that are coming from totally different traditions and so forth, and they're, being blended together really nicely, I think. So let's hear this. Yeah, sorry, I think this piece just came out really, really nice. And there's so many just interesting things about it that are, what's really interesting to me is how it, relates to all teaching in the course and using a lot of these techniques, but putting them into a really different context, a not tonal context. And when I say not tonal, what I mean is it's not in one particular key throughout, or even for like 8 bars at a time. It's not based on continually returning to the same tonic. It's more flowing than that, but despite that, there are little tonicizations, little 2-5-1s, little things going on that resemble traditional. These ideas of using things that are recognizable as chords, but include all sorts of additional color tones and then don't stay in a key. And for a while, people would actually put in key changes every 4 bars or whatever, and eventually they just sort of gave up on that and said, you know what, let's just not even have a key signature because it doesn't stay in a key long enough to be worth the effort of remembering the key signature. And so, so to me, this is very much feeling like it's in that sort of feeling. And I'm actually, my own palette of sounds that I know, as far as like particular classical pieces, is, I mean, I've listened to a ton of music. I know what I know, but I don't necessarily have a ton of great examples to say, oh, I know specifically what it reminds me of. But I'm gonna find something here. I wonder if this is actually on MuseScore, if someone has done a version of this in MuseScore. It's a quite complex piece, so I'm gonna guess that that's not actually something that anyone has ever done. But I'm just gonna take a quick look. Now it doesn't look like it's got Piano Sonata in there. I'm gonna play just a little segment of a piano of the Erin Copeland Piano Sonata, just a recording of it, so you can hear this. This is a piece of music that I first heard maybe 20 years ago, and I was very fascinated by it. I bought the sheet music for it, but I never actually learned the thing. So I want to see if there's like a video where someone is showing the sheet music for it. But that would be especially nice if that's the case. It's hard to say if any. Oh, I see. It's hard to say if any of these are showing the sheet music or not. So I'm just going to pick a random version here. So this is just something we're going to hear, and I just want you to hear this sound to realize how these sounds can be incorporated into music that's, not necessarily jazz. Oh gosh, sorry about that. That's always the case, right? I should have gone to Spotify.
Making the most of all you've been given isn't about you alone. So you shouldn't have to figure it out alone.
Here we go. This isn't, okay, so this isn't what I'm expecting. It's not terribly far removed from the sound that I was going for, but I might have to just take a pass on going more. The one I'm thinking of is like big chords to start with, and maybe that's just the third movement that I'm thinking of, but I didn't think so, and I didn't think there was more than one piano sonata by Erin Copeland, so I'm just going to try one other version just to see, because I am a little confused by what I just heard there. Yes, Colleen, if you pay for the YouTube Music subscription service, then it will skip the ads on that, so that's probably what you've done and what I should do as well. I do Spotify Pro, not just for that reason, but for the better search and so forth. I'm not going to spend a ton of time worrying about this, but I did want to be able to play just a little bit. So this is all 3 movements, so I'd be able to skip around if it's a little different. Because I don't think, I think my sheet music is at home. Yeah, this is the one. Come on. Play. So I'm just going to pause that there because you get the basic idea. It is not tonal. It doesn't tell you a story about 2-5-1s in a particular key, and yet at any given moment, that yeah, something like that, right? There was an actual chord that was. The individual chords we're hearing basically sound like seventh chords with an added ninth or an added 11th or whatever. A lot of the chords really are those types of sonorities, and sometimes there's even little things that are resembling little 5-to-1 kind of progressions in them. So it's a non-tonal language, but I use the word non-tonal differently than atonal, because atonal has all these connotations of going out of your way to avoid any sense of tonality whatsoever, not having anything that sounds like a triad, not having anything that sounds like a scale. And that's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about using the elements of tonality, but not using them to establish a specific key. I don't know if that even makes sense. We're using scales and we're using chords, but we're not using them to establish traditional key structures and harmonic structures within those keys, but we're using the same element. So it's a whole kind of genre of composing. So Sora, I see that, yeah, you said that the flute sonata you're familiar with. And so, yeah, these sounds are in the air, and it's not just like that's not the only example. It's just one that came to mind in listening to that. As I said, there's any number of Debussy pieces, Gershwin, the Gershwin preludes for that matter, Stravinsky piano pieces, all sorts of pieces for piano that are living in that world in that time period of the late 19th, early 20th century, that it sort of defines that music for piano. So, what I want to do is then I want to jump off from there. So anyhow, again, thanks to everyone for participating in that course, and we got some really great music out of it, and I'm really happy about that, and I hope you guys are too. What I want to do now is kind of maybe do a little rundown and think about some of that as it applies to other music. And so yesterday in the MuseScore Cafe, I went and did a rundown of the year in MuseScore, and talked about all the things that happened this year in MuseScore and with the corporation, the company that runs it, and with MuseScore.com, with the software itself, with my Mastering MuseScore courses and community and all these things. One thing I didn't mention, because I don't know, it felt a little too personal, was to talk about, in my life, the fact that, as many of you know, my father passed away in June, and I had gone to Florida and was visiting the family and got to, be with him during that his final weeks there. I didn't know it was going to be his final weeks, so I'm glad it worked out for me to be able to travel there. But during that time then, I wrote a piece for him, and I didn't know I was going to do a jazz piano course, and it's not a jazz piano piece. And yet, as we're going to see, I just want to take a look at this. So during the office hours on Tuesday, which, if you're not familiar, again, this is a thing for all access members. It's like basically a Zoom call where we can be talking more directly and demonstrating things, learning, asking questions, and so forth. Great resource. I recommend people take advantage of it. Anyhow, I went through a little bit of Reunion, which is a piece I wrote as a MuseScore demo many years ago, 10 years ago, well, almost 10 years ago. And I went through that piece and sort of showed how some of the techniques that I ended up showing in the jazz piano course apply to it. So I'm going to talk about some of the same things here. So this is my piece for Dad, right? Y'all remember this one because I used it as an example a ton of times. Okay, so there's those first 4 bars, and I just want to point out in those first 4 bars how much of the kind of techniques that I've talked about are present. So for one thing, right off the bat, this is a major 7th chord, right? B flat major 7th, and that's like, if I'm not going to be using a lot of triads in this music. And when I say this music, this isn't a jazz piece. It's using, it's informed by my experience. Sounds like that, major 7th chords, as basic chords. Major 7th, minor 7th, dominant 7th, all the 7th chord types are going to be here. You're going to find almost no triads in this piece, because if you use a triad in a piece that's mostly about 7ths and then adding color tones and so forth, that triad sounds naked in comparison. So you use it when you actually want that sound. So here, there's no additional color tones. It's just the major 7th chord. Now, this is a D7 chord, but it's got an E flat in it. It's got a flat 9 that moves by step. And so it's got this inner voice motion. Right? So it's got that little inner voice motion there. It's actually more prominent when that theme returns. So I'm just, outlining this voice here. E flat, C, D. So it's some of the same ideas that I'm talking about of these inner voice motions. That's not unique to jazz, right? I mean, that's basic piano writing. That's how Mozart writes. Actually, not. That doesn't sound as much like Mozart, but it definitely sounds like Chopin. Let's put it that way, as far as the use of the inner voices in there. But, then you can look at other things here, like here's a bit of that. So what's going on there? This is an E flat major chord. It doesn't actually have a third in it. It does on the and of the beat. So this is an E flat major 7th chord, but it's got a 6th and a 9th on it. And then E flat minor chord, the minor 4 chord, going to 1. So 4 to minor 4 to 1. It's using that type of progression, which again, not unique to jazz. You find it as far back as Beethoven and earlier. I don't find it much in Bach, so I'm not really sure when that became a common thing. I'd be kind of interested to know a little more of the history of that, since I talk about that progression so much. But in any case, 4 to minor 4 to 1. But I say 4, it's got the 9th and the 6th in it. And then my minor 4 chord has the major 7th in the melody, in that inner voice. And then it also has in the left hand. It's got that. So right after it goes C to B flat here, it also goes C to B flat there. So I'm getting some mileage out of that little 9 to 1 motion in both the right hand and then in the left hand. And I'm calling it an inner voice, even though there's really only one voice in the left hand, because conceptually, this piece, it's using kind of the same techniques that I talked about in the final lessons of the jazz piano course, of taking the bass and kind of letting the left hand split time between bass and tenor roll. So like bass, tenor, bass, tenor, bass, tenor, bass. Maybe that one's bass. I'm sorry. Bass. I'm singing like what I want to sing, not what I wrote. Bass, bass, bass. So there's a bass note, but then I'm arpeggiating up. And yeah, some of these arpeggios are the very specific one, like right here, 1, 5, 10. And I talk about that pattern exactly, right? And here on that F minor chord, I've got a 9th on it, right? And I'm letting that 9th move down to the 7th to have some motion. And then here's 13 to flat 13. 13 to flat 13, right? So all those things that I talked about. Here's a little block chord thing where I'm moving the melody and moving it in parallel thirds, right? And here it's in a 3-note voicing, and here it's moving in a 4-note voicing. Right? So that's a 4-note block chord voicing moving there. Elsewhere, I actually use I don't use the drop 2 so much on this version because it felt a little too jazzy, but I do use it right here. at the end of the bridge. Here are all drop 2 voicings. Those are all drop 2 voicings. Now this one isn't really, it's just kind of fun. These are actually fairly, that's all within an octave. So that's like the starting point that you might drop 2 from. It's just an interesting voicing of an F7 chord that doesn't have the 7th in it. And then this one does. So anyhow, that is literally, this is C minor 7. So C minor 7 with a C in the C in the melody, but I'm replacing the root with the 9th because that's a thing. So right, the 9th in the melody, and then it's taking the place of the root. Then comes the 7th, then the 5th, and then the 3rd, but I take that 2nd to top note and drop it down. That's drop 2 happening right there. So, yeah, so I'm looking, Peter, I see your comment about pausing, and to be honest, I'm looking at my phone, and I see I'm looking at the playback there, and it does seem to be a little glitchy here. So the problem could be my own internet connection, although I don't actually believe that's to be the case. What the heck? This is like a new Windows 11 thing I haven't really gotten, but that's the right Wi-Fi for me to be connected to. So maybe my building's having internet issues. So sorry about that. But yeah, that's unfortunate, but hopefully it's not too terrible. Okay, so here also, as another example of the techniques and things that I talked about, this flat 6 to 5 is one of the cadences that is talked. It's a tritone substitution for a 2/5, or in classical language, it's an augmented 6th chord. So in the key of F, which is essentially where we're at right now, we're in the key of F, right? Because I've just done this little, right, 1/6 in the key of F, and this could have been 2 and then 5. So it could have been a 2/5, but instead it's a flat 6/5. So that flat 6 is, in jazz terms, we call it a tritone substitution for 2. In classical terms, we call that an augmented 6th chord. This is all the kind of stuff that gets discussed in much detail in my harmony and chord progressions course. So those of you who said, I really want more of that, that 1 week we did would just scratch the surface, I want to get more of that, that's where you get it. And I'll probably figure out some way to do a kind of cohorty version of that going forward into next year. But anyhow, that's what's going on here, flat 6 to 5 in the key of F. And just as I describe in the jazz piano course, when we use that dominant 7th, if it's not dominant 7ths that are not going down a 5th, typically take sharp 11 as their alteration. And that's the case. It's right there in the melody. D flat 7, sharp 11 is the melody note. It also has an extension that's not altered, the 9th. And then my 5 chord, C7, has that motion that I was desperately trying to get everyone to use somewhere. 4 to 3 while going 9 to flat 9, because it's so lovely. And I do that multiple places because you can't only do that once. So here's like another place where I do it here. So same thing there. Here's the B flat on the F. So this is C minor 7. C minor 7, well actually C7 with a sharp 11 because it's not going down a 5th, it's going to a 2 chord, a minor 2 chord. And then we've got G to G flat while also having B flat to A in this voice up here. So over the 5 chord, that's G to G flat and B flat to A. So it's 9 to flat 9 while going 4 to 3. And so yeah, I use that sound quite a bit. Here's another similar example. 4, 4, 3, while also going 4, 9. And this right here is an upper structure. E flat triad over the F, and then a D triad over that F. So that's an upper structure voicing. All of those techniques that I dealt with, you find in this piece, because it's not just a technique for jazz piano Christmas songs. It's all stuff. It's all stuff that now exists in the world, and we don't pretend it doesn't exist. We make use of it, and we incorporate it. If you are, you're not obligated to, but once you get exposed to these sounds and get them into your ear, you start finding opportunities to use them to enrich. I could have written this to sound more like Mozart. Sure, I could have, but that's not who I am. I'm not Mozart. I'm me. And so I'm going to bring in things I learned from Mozart, but also things I learned from Bach. Maybe not a lot of Bach stuff in this piece, but bring in things that I've learned from Bill Evans. And all of these things are part of who I am. And that's what I want to encourage in you. So one of the things that I'm constantly doing in my courses and in these master classes is talk about, trying to really get inside a particular sound, not just randomly throw notes down, but say, hey, how can we really get this sound that Bach used so well, or this sound here that Schumann used so well, or this sound that Erin Copeland used so well, or this sound here that Duke Ellington used so well. How can we really get inside that sound and learn to use that sound for ourselves? So that's always kind of my goal here, is to learn the techniques that were used by great composers of the past and see how to bring them into our own present day music. So yeah, that's always my my goal. So I just want to check on the most recent comments in here. So minor, small. I'm not sure what that comment was about. Probably something that I mentioned. Minor, intermittent glitches. Got it. Okay. So yeah, anyhow, harmony, of course, is something that I love to talk about. But Graham, thank you for that perfect segue there, because in my newsletter, I mentioned that, when we talk about music theory, almost everyone who teaches music theory gets wrapped up talking about harmony, and we don't talk enough about melody and voice leading. And so, Graham mentioning the voice leading, yes. So thanks for the comment on it. And voice leading is, when you write a melody, the melody itself. That melody is voice leading, and it's, doing all the things that they tell you to do. D, going to C is by step, 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 and then this non-chord tone, resolving to a chord tone. This is what's called a double appoggiatura. Got other tones too, could be called a double neighbor tone depending on what else is going on. But in any case, it's we're approaching this chord tone B flat from a step above and a step below. Everything about the melody itself is good voice leading, I would like to say. It's mostly steps. The little leaps, the uses of non-chord tones are all kind of according to common conventions. And it's not because it's a rule you have to follow, it's because that's the stuff we're used to hearing that makes things sound non-random. Pretty much anyone writing a melody tends to use good voice leading because we're used to thinking in terms of melody. The part that's trickier is to think about voice leading not just in the melody, but in the inner voices also. So like, this is my very favorite part. When I play this, I really go to some effort to bring out. I'm not so crazy about that leap up to the F sharp, but it completed the chord and did what I needed it to do. So sometimes you sacrifice a little bit about voice leading to maybe to complete the chords the way you want to complete the chords. And also the reality of piano playing is if I'm gonna leap in my melody, I'm going to have to leap in the accompaniment voices too, in my inner voices, because my hand, I can't take my pinky off and move it up here while leaving my thumb down there. So if the melody leaps up, the voice below it's going to have to leap up also to some extent. So yeah, sometimes you have to sacrifice the ideal voice leading, but I really tried to make a lot of good uses of this. You know, that's a nice little melody. So the moving lines here are, you know, voice leading stuff. And that's not even part of the melody. I think that's all inner voices. The melody is still holding the B flat, and then the inner voices are going boo-da-da-dum. So this is on this is on an A7 chord here. 13, flat 13, and then over D7, 9 to flat 9. Sora, this is that same basic flat 13, and then the chord goes down a fifth. And that flat 13 comes down, becomes the ninth here. Not becomes, but leads to. And then to flat 9. So, and then here's the 4, 4 to 3, 4 to 3. So I've got the 4 to 3 happening as well as the 9 to flat 9. All those sounds. So yeah, all of these sounds are sounds that you can be using in this kind of context. And yeah, I'm just sort of jumping around and showing how this piece is made from a lot of the same ingredients. So sometimes when you when I'm giving people comments on your pieces, and I say, you know, I think really if you really got inside the study of harmony more, it would help improve what you're trying to do here. These are the details that I'm talking about. It's things like really thinking about the voice leading of these notes and the specific colors. Sharp 11 on this chord versus flat 9 on that chord is significant, and it's not random. It's tried and true. And when you learn these patterns and learn how to work within them so that you can just find them really quickly. When do I want to use sharp 11? When do I want to use flat 9? When do I want to, you know, where does this flat 9 want to resolve to? This flat 9 really normally resolves down here. But I didn't. That line, because my melody was going up, that's that I didn't get to fully resolve that E flat. I could have by letting it resolve to the D there. It felt physically awkward. I think at one point I wrote it that way with the D in there, so that line could resolve down to the D. Normally I would tell you should, but it felt physically awkward to me. And now it doesn't. But I think it's the fact that then I wanted to go from this 3-note voicing to that 2-note voicing, and the jump in my fingers felt slightly awkward. But if I were scoring this for an ensemble, I think I would let that resolve to D. And that's a comment that I often make in people's stuff, in people's music, when I say, you know, you've got this lovely line going there, but then it's kind of left hanging. It would be that much more effective if it resolved. So that's the feedback I would give myself here, is this line really wanted to go here, and I didn't. And, you know, I had my reasons for not, but it's the kind of thing you do want to think about. It's part of good voice leading, and it definitely makes it sound that much more effective, especially if this was its own instrument. See, on the piano, all these notes are being played by the same instrument. They're all a piano, or a digital piano in this case. But if this was being scored where this boo-da-doo-da-dum was a violin or a French horn or whatever it is, then it would sound really weird to just have that French horn going wah-na-na-na, and not finish that sentence. That would feel much more awkward than leaving a note out on piano. So there's all sorts of, you know, we've only got so many fingers, they can only spread in certain ways, and so there's compromises that we make sometimes with voice leading when it comes to piano that we wouldn't make orchestrating. So that's one of the things I want to talk about more, actually writing for different kinds of ensembles. So we'll probably do some SATB writing and things like that. So, in any case, these were all things that I wanted to talk through. Here's another, these parallel thirds, right? Four, minor 4, and instead of going minor 4 to 1 here, I'm letting it go to 5, but using those color tones. 4 to 3, 9 to flat 9, but also 5 to sharp 11, and that sharp 11 works here because it's coming back up. Normally, I don't often use sharp 11 on the 5 chord, but in this case, it's resolving up to the A, and it's a good voice leading. So voice leading has a lot to do with how we choose notes to play, in addition to just the ordinary harmonic concerns. So how do I define voice leading? I don't have a great definition. I think everything I've been talking about is part of that definition. It's basically connecting notes smoothly. That's my best definition. It's writing in such a way that you are perceiving of a chord not just as 4 notes or 3 notes or however many notes it is, but as 4 distinct voices, each of which is moving smoothly by step, or if there's a leap, resolve it nicely, pay attention to where the chord tones and the non-chord tones are. It's paying attention to those details of the motions of individual notes. So like this measure right here, this is 3 distinct voices. One's going, and another voice, the middle voice there, is going, the bottom voice has the biggest jumps in it. It's actually not even big jumps. And then that G flat comes down to the F. So it's really thinking through where each note of the chord goes, and that's in a non-contrapuntal setting like this, where, because this isn't counterpoint, it's really just these notes are accompaniment, right? There's a melody and there's accompaniment. But if it was writing a fugue or any sort of more contrapuntal type of piece, then more obviously each voice needs to kind of connect smoothly. Each voice wants to be a melody. So what I would say about voice leading is it's the act of looking at something as multiple voices and making sure that each voice makes sense as a melody. So that's my my quick definition. So yeah, I want to do some more in the realm of SATB kind of stuff. So that'll be something I'll put out to anyone who wants to do some SATB type of writing. Pick a piece that you like and write a 4-part choral arrangement or a 4-part violin, a string quartet or wind quartet or saxophone quartet, SATB. So soprano, where the notes kind of sit maybe between C here and G up there. That's actually quite high. And then alto, where maybe the notes sit around here, F to C. Tenor, where the notes sit here around C to G. And then bass, where the notes sit around here, F to C. So the bass and the alto are basically an octave apart, and in terms of their ranges, and the tenor and soprano are basically an octave apart. No, those ranges aren't exact fixed ranges. This isn't like a clarinet that can't go below a certain note. It depends on the individual person, but that's probably a good range to stick within. Maybe a little smaller still. Instead of an octave and a fifth, maybe an octave and a third is that much safer, so that your soprano might be here, your tenor might be here. That's probably safer. And then maybe your alto is here, F to A, and your bass is here, F to A, something like that. So those ranges fit human voices well, but they also fit like instruments. Like this is basically a good range for a soprano. Actually, it's a little low for soprano saxophone, but it's good range, but it's playable. But it's also a good alto saxophone range, as is This is a good alto saxophone range. This is almost the lowest note an alto sax can play. This is a great tenor sax range, and this is a great baritone sax range. So a saxophone quartet has those same basic ranges. Wind quartets you write in similar things, or violin. This is violin. This note here is too low for second violin. You'd have to keep it to here, but viola, which would typically be the tenor voice, yeah, that's the lowest note on a viola, and this is very comfortable for cello. So string quartet is also part of, when you write for string quartet, you're basically thinking SATB. Barbershop is its own thing, right? So it's four voices, but it's got its own unique aspects to it because, first of all, traditionally they're all male voices, but one or two of them has a falsetto that allows them to sing high, but the spread of the notes is different, and we usually put the melody not on top, but the second to top note, right? And then the tenor is above that. So in any case, it's whole separate thing about barbershop that I would actually love to do sometime. But let's maybe do a straightforward 4-part SATB with melody on top, and try to write something, and we'll see what people come up with next week. So yeah, try to write something, whether it's a whole piece or just 8 bars or something. Write 8 bar, write a little chunk of something for SATB, or dig out something you've written before, and let's talk about that next week, okay? So I think that said, that feels like a good stopping point. So I want to thank everyone again for being here as part of the Music Masterclass series that I do on Thursdays, and I'm looking forward to just a whole year ahead of doing this. I should mention also, yesterday in the MuseScore Cafe, I talked about my studio setup here. This coming semester, I'm going to be teaching a class before and after this at a university here, so I won't be able to be in my studio, but I've been working on how I can get some aspect of this piano keyboard thing here, how to get an overhead mic on my piano at school, and I think I've got that figured out. So I'll be able to have something. I think I'll have something, kind of close to this setup going forward this next semester, even if I can't be in my studio. So thanks again, everyone, and I will see you next time.